Welcome back to the Price Wall Podcast. Today we are going to talk about the ingredients that are making functional foods more functional and better for you snacks better for you. I'm here with the team from Glanbia Nutritionals, Jonathan Boehner, the Senior R&D Director, and James Stone, Vice President of Global Marketing and Insights. Gentlemen, thanks for coming on the show and everything. We're really looking forward to learning a lot about the processes that you have geared towards making functional foods better. So please come on and introduce yourselves, and then let's get into what Glanbia Nutritionals is up to.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, thanks for the invite. Appreciate being with you today here. My background, so I'm a trained food scientist. Probably the other most famous food scientist, Clark Griswold, in our camp. So we learn a lot about the food chemistry. But I went to the University of Illinois in Champaign for school, and then joined a small family company that was an extrusion company. So I've been in extrusion a bulk of my career, which we'll talk about in a bit, I'm sure. Kind of try to take the mystery out of it a little bit for you. And so I live in a small town, based in a small town called Gridley, Illinois, central Illinois, about 2 hours south of Chicago. And that's where the Glanbia Extrusion Innovation Center is at. So we do all the process and product innovation work out of that site, the group of scientists based here. And those get scaled to our Mooresville, Indiana location where our commercial production is. So it's a little bit about me. So thanks again for having us.
Great to be here, and thank you for the introduction. I'm James Stone. I'm the head of global marketing and insights for Glanbia Nutritionals. I've been with the company for a little over almost 3.5 years. I've got a kind of a varied background. I started in the B2C space and the consumer side, actually, with the Kellogg company early on in my career, working on ready-to-eat cereals and healthy snacking, things like Rice Krispies and Nutri-Grain, as well as launching. You may know the brand Raisin Bran Crunch. So that was one of my launches. It's over a $2 billion business now for Kellogg's. I've also worked in several other industries: home cleaning, the automotive aftermarket, both in B2C and B2C sides. But I've been a long time really practitioner of health and wellness. I actually competed early on in my life in natural bodybuilding shows. And I've been following the ketogenic lifestyle for about the last 10 years, actually certified in teaching and helping people get on the ketogenic lifestyle and how they manage through the dietary needs and lifestyle. Really a big believer in that approach to life. So in our insights role here, we focus on really understanding consumers and our customers and the dynamics around the marketplace and applying all that learning. And so I'm happy to share some of that today as we talk about healthy snacking and better for you snacking. So again, thanks for having us.
Yeah, you're welcome. As a segue, we did have two other members of your team on talking about the strength platform. That was episode 174. So this is not even a totally clear segue. You, as they explained in that episode, Glanbia Nutritionals is a very large company, part of a bigger whole and everything. So with this, when we started doing the research for a couple articles that we were writing about these platforms, we realized that you have some research showing that there's different kinds of snackers and everything. And I found that this is a whole different world than the typical ready-to-mix powder, pre-workout, joint supplements, all that stuff that we oftentimes talk about. So really excited. I'm not even sure where you'd like to begin, but I do think like understanding the different types of individuals, whether it's by dietary needs, like you said, like keto dieters versus someone who's carbon up, or perhaps the different types of like crunch profiles people like. How do you generally like to start this off?
Yeah, I think maybe the first starting point is to talk a little bit about snacking in general. And you're right, we do have different segments, but I think it's important to recognize how much of a snacking population we have in the United States. So here's kind of a starting data point. So the number of times the average American consumer consumes a sweet snack every week is 6.4 times. So think about it, 7 days in a week, 6.4 times. So people are averaging sweet snacks almost one a day. But I think when we unpack it a little bit more, what we're finding is that snackability, if you will, that frequency of snacking has definitely been changing over the last probably 5 to 10 years, and really started to see an increase in the last few years around what role snacking plays. And so functionality of snacking is becoming really much more important. What does functionality mean? That means that people are looking to add some things into their snacks as well as remove some things in their snacks. let's talk about a couple things that they're looking. So the number one thing that consumers, snackers, are looking to reduce is sugar. They're also looking to reduce the number of carbohydrates actually in their snacks. So at the same time, they're looking to definitely reduce sugar and definitely pull back on the amount of carbs. They're also looking to increase some things. The number one thing they're trying to increase is protein. And the number two thing is more around fiber or digestive health. So that kind of starts to get a framework in terms of how snacking is evolving and what people are looking for. Now, what we're going to talk about today, what gets us excited, is if you look at how people look to get their protein intake, for example, food and beverage is still the number one, hands down, by over 55%. That's the number one that they go to. But number two, 1 in 3 consumers are using fortified foods to get more protein. What would be a fortified food? It would be, for example, a protein puff or a protein snack or something like that. So the role of what we're going to talk about today has really become to the forefront of people's lifestyle.
Awesome. I love all that. I think it's kind of funny, James, you mentioned a lot of keto, and now you were talking about pulling back on carbohydrates. I don't think we're looking to go to zero here, maybe in all scenarios, but in a lot of cases, getting to like a more reasonable number is like a really good expectation. I'm most excited today to talk about the extrusion technology that Mike mentioned, and I think this might be a segue into talking about like how you guys achieve these pullbacks in carbohydrates and other areas. So, Jonathan, on our pre-call, you kind of talked to us about extrusion, and I think you're a bit of an expert here. I don't know if you mind that word, but my favorite thing that I've learned about extrusion is really the amount of areas where extrusion is really used outside of healthy snacking, and how we're kind of hacking this technology to use it to make better foods. So could you tell us a little bit about the history of extrusion, where it comes from, and how you guys are using it?
Yeah, absolutely. So extrusion's been a process that's been around for a long time, and I usually start at the basics. I go back always to the Play-Doh fun factory for people, right? That toy you had as a kid, you put a chunk of Play-Doh in that toy, and then you kind of pressed that lever and pushed it out, and through a die, basically, is what we're doing. So that's extrusion at its core, is taking something and forcing it through a shaping die in order to do that. So you see it in automotive plastics, moldings. You see it in aluminum extrusion, where they're doing a profile to create a piece of angle or something with metal. So it's used quite a bit across different industries. It was kind of picked up in the feed industry years ago with a simple single screw extruder to take molasses and feed and kind of combine those two and make a pellet out of that material to make it easier to handle, less sticky. The farmer would use that kind of simple process. We're a long way from that now with automation, and what we use is called twin screw extrusion. So we use twin screw because what happens is we're taking a fine powder, so proteins tend to be a really fine powder, and we're moving those through the extrusion system with 2 screws. And what we do there is we take a blend of powders and we put them in this mixer. We mix those ingredients together, get a homogeneous blend, and then we introduce that to the extruder. An extruder is really just, you think of things in the food space, right? Eggs. You take an egg, you can't consume it. Well, you can't consume it, I guess, raw if you want to, but most people are going to cook that or transform that somehow. And so extrusion is really a simple process of just fast cooking and mixing of an ingredient. And so we're taking protein ingredients, starch ingredients, we may have sweeteners or fibers in there, and we introduce those to the extruder. We convey them through the extruder by adding water. We create a dough that is made really quickly. So within a matter of seconds, it goes from a powder to an expanded cereal or snack. So at the end of that extruder, we have the die that shapes it. So it could be a ring shape, it could be a ball shape type product. And that compression at the end, because of that die that's restricting it and is forming the shape, you create steam inside that extruder. And so you have expansion, it's under pressure, that steam and water is under pressure inside the extruder, as it hits atmospheric pressure, that steam has to flash off, and it expands that dough, and then your dough has to be of such a rheology that it will hold that expansion. So it puffs, in a probably the simplest kind of view would be something like the balloon guy at the fair. He's making those long balloons. When he puffs them up, he's puffing that balloon up, and it looks like that, but there's a degree of collapse of that rope that happens, and then sets that structure. So you have different degrees of expansion, and then that rope is cut. So we cut it into discrete pieces for a snack or a cereal curl. If you would have told me 25 years ago when I first got into the extrusion business that we'd be throwing protein and fiber in and having a crispy, crunchy snack, I would have said no way. Fiber and protein are usually the enemy of expansion. And so to get a nice, delicate snack texture that most people are looking for with protein and fiber, it's really challenging. And that's really the IP that we've created with Glanbia, the marriage of Glanbia protein chemistry. And I was with a company called Packmore that was acquired by Glanbia about 4 years ago. And we had the extrusion technology. So that marriage of protein chemistry expertise and extrusion processing expertise coming together has really allowed us to push the envelope on protein content, on fiber content, that doesn't allow or doesn't force you to have to give up kind of that eating experience that you look for.
So you're making protein snacks or protein components that could go inside of snacks that might not be super relatable, but for people listening to be a little bit more for them to relate to the things you're talking about, this extrusion technology is used in popular snacks, right? Could you mention like something that people might be able to recognize from a grocery store?
Yeah, so if you look at cheese balls, you get the tub of the orange cheese balls, right? That's a product made for years via extrusion technology. If you look at something like that, you're going to see 6 to 7% protein content in something like that. It's pretty empty calories, kind of not really a good healthy snack. We're creating products that would push up into like the 65% range of protein for a similar eating experience and format. So it's recognizable, but it really pushes that envelope on the protein side to get up there. So you have Cheetos, Fritos are made with extrusion as well. They're a fried chip, but they're made with extrusion. So it's the forming of that. A lot of people with toddlers might see toddler puffs. They're very dissolvable kind of toddler puff. So as a safety factor of it's going to dissolve if they do swallow it. So there's a lot of those crunchy, crispy snacks that you think of that are made with extrusion.
What was the hurdle between those two? My understanding is that you had to use a lot of starches and you guys really had to create proteins that were appropriate for the process. But could you tell us about how you really made that leap?
Yeah, I mean, it really is that marriage of protein chemistry expertise. Our group we weren't deep in protein chemistry and how do we modify those to expand well and support expansion. And so that marriage coming together, and we can't talk too much into the details of how we do that, but it is something that the expertise of the extrusion plus that protein chemistry is key because if people that are eating, low carb generally tend to stay away from snacks, but they still crave that crunchy, if you're not able to eat cereal, they still crave that crunch, right? And starch typically is what has always done that historically. And so we've created products that bring that crunchy, crispy texture without high levels of carbohydrates. We do have some products that don't include any carbohydrates and push up into that 85+% range of native protein in the base. So we can really push the limit if we need to, or we can step it back and be, down in that 50% range, depending on what the product is. So they may include a bit of starch and carbohydrate just to kind of allow for a reduction in that and also give us expansion, but you can push it if you need to.
does the experience change with the different amounts of protein? Like, we look at whey proteins, which is in a whole other sector of Glanbia that you guys excel in. Like, your isolates won't be nearly as creamy and milky as obviously like your concentrates will. Like, is it a similar experience spectrum with these?
Yeah, we can really dial in pretty close to like we'll get a lot of folks that come in and work with us where we co-innovate with them, and they'll say, "Here's our cheese ball. This is our target," and we've been able to get products that you don't necessarily know that it's a non-starch based product in terms of texture. Flavor, certainly corn is typically what's used in a cheese ball, so it's a very recognizable flavor in the snack industry. But so you will see a bit of a flavor impact with dairy proteins, and generally that is probably the only thing that we're giving up on is a little bit of that non-known flavor that you get with corn in the snacking world.
Okay, so just so I understand how the business itself works, let's say I am a brand or I'm starting a new food company and I want to make a fancy cheese ball, cheese puff with some protein that has a unique spice on it, like a peri peri flavor or something like that. Would I are you making the full product with the brand and then bagging it yourself, or are you creating the ingredients and then sending it off to a co-manufacturer that deals with the foods and has the process down? I'm not sure how integrated you are in this process compared to, like, say, purchasing just protein powders or whatever.
Yeah, so we have kind of optimized protein solutions that we can sell to other extrusion manufacturers. So if they said, "Hey, we have a project and we're looking to develop this product," we can sell a protein to them. However, we do have the internal capabilities. We love to innovate with our customers, so we ask them to come in and work with us and give us those targets. What's in market that you're looking to do? Are you looking to match somebody or get close to this texture, this format? We prefer to work with them internally because that really allows us to drill in really quickly on what they mean by crispy, what they mean by crunchy, all those textural attributes, and then we can coat that internally. So we have internal manufacturing capabilities under the Glanbia family to be able to do that. So we can take it from the ideation phase, that collaboration work that we do on site. They come on site and work with us for that development, and then we would scale that up to our own plants for production and coating. So we can do topical coating, whether it's an oil-based slurry, so similar to what you see in a cheese ball format, or we can also do a water-based slurry, which is more common in cereal products. But we can do it all under one roof. We don't do retail packaging, but we have partners that we work with to get it into, if you want a bottle or a stand-up zipper pouch or just a regular chip bag. We work with other partners to do that.
Oh, okay. So you can create a ton of the cheese balls, and then they have to get packed by someone, though.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's also worth noting that we can apply different proteins to these products. So we have some customers that will start off with a milk protein solution, and we have ranges and percentages of as Jonathan was explaining. We can also do whey protein, and then we can also do non-soy based plant proteins. So I think the exciting thing here is, regardless of where a brand is going and what they're trying to offer from a dietary lifestyle, kind of a nutrition portfolio, if they're looking to add protein into these types of snacks in these shapes, and then certainly applying and adding in the flavor capabilities, even if they want to vary the types of protein, we can also work with them on that.
Okay. Now, earlier on, you said there's a steaming process involved. So if we wanted to add any functional ingredients, or I assume like the proteins have to be, you of course know this stuff, that they have to be able to handle a certain temperature. About how hot does that get if we're talking about adding something functional, like we want to chase a GLP-1 trend or something like that?
Yeah, typically with functional ingredients, those we would try to move to the topical coating application because it is going to see a degree of heat in the extruder. And so, those are expensive ingredients typically. So if we're going to apply those, we tend to put that into the coating piece because that doesn't see near the heat and shear that you see within within some of the other processes. So we have to be a bit careful on what it is. Some things are heat stable, so those can go through the extruder just fine. It's the ones that are maybe encapsulated for a flavor reason, those kind of things we wouldn't put through the extruder. Caffeine, for instance, if you wanted to, fortify the puff with caffeine, we want to encapsulate that and not probably have to put it through the extruder because the flavor is pretty rough as is.
So we talked before about we've talked a lot today about whey protein, but we also, my understanding is you guys also produce some plant proteins as well. Can we talk about the struggles of getting into plant protein with it? Because plant protein it's a trend still. I think whey will always reign king, but like with not as great availability in whey, I think a lot of people are looking into plant protein, not just for dietary restrictions, but just for like easy of availability, and also like with the improvements of the technology, there's a lot better plant proteins available. But I imagine plant protein like matter just isn't the same as working with whey. So like, what was it like getting into that? Were there any hurdles that you guys had to fight?
Yeah, I think it's similar. Something like pea protein, for instance, is fairly new in relative terms. If you look at something like a soy protein isolate, been around, 30, 40 years, has been really refined in terms of functionality. And so as we move into non-soy things like a pea protein, we're working with ingredients that maybe aren't optimized for extrusion. And so we've had to work through those same things as well. What functions well? What's the target? Can we get expansion? They're generally not, especially with pea, they're generally not isolated to a 90% protein level or anything like that, where you'd have with whey or milk proteins or soy protein. And so that's probably coming, but there's a much different structure to that protein that creates some challenges. Soy functions really well, but obviously there's not a lot of push around soy. People aren't looking to introduce soy. So looking at the alternate proteins that come at a price point that works in market, but also have the functionality. So we do work with pea protein. Our pea proteins have a great flavor profile. They're probably, we always say they lend themselves a little bit better to savory flavors because they have a natural umami flavor profile to them. So they're difficult, a little more difficult with sweet flavors, just because of the natural beany flavor notes that you may get or umami flavor notes that you would get. Whereas dairy proteins are nice, clean. You're starting with a clean palate that you can do anything with, sweet, savory. They work really well.
So what are some of the trends you're seeing in the plant protein world? Because on one hand, we're seeing a lot of cool snacks come out, and not even geared towards vegans, but just either being dairy free or just being clean label. And then on the other hand, you're seeing failures in companies like Impossible Meats and companies that seem to be trying to like mimic meat and everything. So what are you kind of seeing with the brands that you're starting to work with right now?
Yeah, I think it's James. I don't know if you want to take that one first. Maybe I can let you talk about the insights on that first.
Yeah, I'll jump in there and then jump in behind me here, Jonathan. So I think the first thing, Mike, you said it right. There's been an evolution from introducing plant as an alternative to meat that really hasn't gone very well. If you look at the way that these products have been introduced as alternatives to meat and kind of the fake meat variants, that hasn't gone well, and it's primarily due to the processing that goes on. And it's tough to tell a story, and we're finding that consumers are very aware of the paradox of somebody telling them that plant is more healthy, and then you look at the processing around the product, and the processing has all these ingredients that I can't even pronounce. And so it really sends an awkward message. And so I think the evolution now is plant is focused on less about being the fake meat version and standing on its own. It's standing on its own in terms of the nutritional value that plant-based nutrition can offer. And part of that comes down to things like, number one, being a complete protein. So Jonathan was mentioning, for example, we work with pea protein. we want to make sure that whatever somebody is buying in this case, let's say a better for you snack, and they're looking for protein, they need to make sure that they're getting complete protein. So that means that you're using either a plant-based complete, or you're using a combination of ingredients that are plant-based, that together they can offer that complete amino acid profile. So I think that's one major change and trend that we're seeing. The second thing is that plant protein especially has struggled with the taste profile. So when you think about over the last 5 years or so, as so many products came out, they didn't have a great taste profile. They had challenges with texture. That, as Jonathan was describing, sometimes if you try and put a sweet flavor on a plant-based product, it doesn't go very well. It has a very off note. And so I think that's the second piece is, if you look at when people are looking at better for you snacking, the number one thing they're looking for is still taste. So it still has to taste good. And that's the thing that's going to bring you back of having repeat consumption. So I think that now the focus is on, let's focus on a plant-based ingredient profile that is good and that offers that complete protein with less processed or less of the poor ingredient profile, or a cleaner ingredient profile, let's say, but also having a better taste and texture profile. And what we're seeing is more and more of a focus on the plant-based products towards savory flavors. So things like sriracha, things like nacho, things like a spicy, like a jalapeno, those sorts of flavors. Number one, they're well known among the consumer. If you think about Frito-Lay, for example, and all the products they have under Doritos and kind of standard snacking, people are really, really comfortable having a savory snack. But now you can have a plant-based product that has higher protein, but has also a more desirable taste profile, and those savory flavors work a little bit better with it. So I think those are two of the main trends that we're seeing right now that are kind of changing the market around the role of plant in the better for you snacking.
3 to 5 years ago, we did a ton in the plant-based meat space. Extrusion is the same process that's used to produce those products. And so we were doing a ton of work in that space, supporting customer launches and innovation. And as we were working in that, I think what you saw is it was really popular, and now it's really tapered off, like we've said. What we're tending to see with plant-based is that it's a great introduction point for some of these traditional snack producers to introduce protein fortification. And it may not be up to a 50% level or that 85% level. It's kind of a step into the market, a low level, low risk protein, but consumers continue to push for protein. So it's that price point question of how can I get the protein in there, and what's that price point trade-off to introduce protein? Maybe I'm at 30% and normally this product would be at 5% protein. I think consumers really are starting to understand the value of protein for satiety, and certainly GLP-1, we see that as GLP-1 starts to become mainstream, it's been crazy to see the growth trend in that, but also that physicians and nutritionists are really becoming big allies for protein fortification and pushing that, which has been really good for the market, obviously.
Gotcha. Thanks. Are there any, on the note of some of these flavor profiles, are there any flavors that you wish someone would do, or do you have any like unique ideas that you think the market is lacking right now for either of you?
That's a great question. I think there are. I mean, I love ethnic flavors, right? So that are a bit unique or maybe out of the mainstream. I think some of the bigger players, they don't always introduce those flavors, but I think they're always great. I look for those unique flavors as I'm out there looking. Our flavors groups, they're looking at those trends. Flavor Producers is a division owned by us as well. And, they're always looking at those trends, like what's the up and coming, peri peri, tiki masala, some of those more unique flavors that maybe are known to some people, but I think are really complex and really great flavors too.
Yeah, I agree. And I would just build on that, maybe saying that an evolution of cheese flavors in this area, I think is really where there's great opportunity. So again, nacho cheese, consumers are real comfortable with those type of kind of foundational flavors, but cheese has really started to find itself in being able to offer a range of different experiences with it. So, whether it's different Italian cheeses or maybe Latin American cheeses, the ability of those cheeses to
Maybe
offer a
coming
different
back.
texture and experience in a snack, I think that's an area that I think we'll have opportunity to explore. I think cheese flavors would be the area that I think that there's ample opportunity and exciting ways to expand. So, the foundational cheese flavors are pretty well known, whether it's a Parmesan or a nacho cheese flavor. But I think there's so many different cheese experiences, textural, think about different types of Italian cheeses, Latin American cheeses, Mexican cheeses that have different tastes and experiences. And cheese also makes a really nice foundation. So you can do cheese plus, there's different cheese plus different ingredients that can offer a little bit of spice or a little bit of sweetness to it and still fits very nicely into a taste and snacking profile. So I think that'd be the other area that I'm excited to see as people push that envelope.
So with regards to that, some of these plant-based snacks, whether or not they're marketing towards vegans, what I'm seeing is that they're getting cheese flavor without using cheese, and they are completely dairy-free. This might be a question for your flavor people or anything. Do you know exactly how they're doing that? Because the one ingredient I've seen in common in a couple of these is nutritional yeast. So I figured that might have been what's doing it, but I was curious if that's a functional ingredient that you've been toying with.
Yeah, I mean that is really the key ingredient. Gives that kind of salty, savory cheese note flavor that you tend to get.
Excellent. Okay. And so, yeah, James, by the way, anytime you want to give us more statistics, I love that in the beginning, like some of the things that we were talking about. Going back, so I'm not sure yeah, when we were doing some of the research, I just wanted to cite these 4 mouth behavior groups because I just thought this is fascinating. You have crunchers, chewers, smooshers, and suckers. So I'm thinking we're mostly talking about crunchers in this point, but like, is this technology? Can you put your technologies towards the other things, such as like chewers? I assume like Starburst, like soft chews. We're seeing that with creatine products, and which you might be involved with. But are we only talking about crunchers right now, or are we also catering to the smooshers and suckers as well?
Yeah, I think in general, and Jonathan, feel free to jump in here. But yeah, I think crunchers is number one. I mean, I think that's the anchor point for us. And what's fun about that though is that when you're talking about crunchers, we have several different shapes and formats that we have. So we have crisps that are kind of little like rice pieces, right? Look like rice pieces. We have bites, which would be like a ball. Think about it like a cheese ball, for example. We have loops. We have flakes, and so there's different shapes and experiences, but the commonality among these different types of engagements, especially when we're talking about savory snacking in particular, is there has to be a textural experience with that, which typically is a little bit of a crunch. It's a little bit of a feeling like there's an enjoyable textural experience, which taps into that crispy, crunchy type of flavor. When you get into sweet snacking, so that would be chocolate, vanilla, caramel, cookies and cream, something like along those lines, you can start to now move into things that are a little bit more like the swooshers that are a little bit softer. They're a little bit more. It can be a little bit more of a kind of melt in your mouth type of experience as opposed to having that crunchy texture. So it's not a right or wrong. It's just those are some of the different preferences, and I think it does vary though by whether it's a savory product or a sweet product.
We're talking about extrusion today specifically, but if you think through some of our other technology, gummies or protein fortified fruit leathers, things that are kind of unique, but are known. There's still known things in the market for folks, but they're fortified with protein, which is very unique. So we work in a lot of those different spaces beyond extrusion to get into those other markets. A lot of the things that we do with extrusion as well as they may be coated with a protein fortified compound coating. So it might have a chocolate coating on top of it to kind of give that indulgent experience, as opposed to like just kind of that snacking ability. But we can drive protein into different areas or components of those products in order to kind of keep the protein level up. Because if you think a lot of the coating ingredients, things like cheese do bring a bit of protein. They also bring a lot of fat. So whatever the base protein starting is, sometimes when we start to coat that, it may dilute your overall protein because the ingredients on the topical application may not be protein. They can be challenging to to maintain that good flavor if you have a lot of protein in a topical coating, for instance.
Yeah, with regards to some of the crunch profiles, I think it's cool to have those different shapes. Like when people start dieting, what I see happen is that people miss the crunch effect, and then in the keto world, and maybe this is James can talk about this, but people sometimes they're missing the crunch. They start getting into nuts, and then nuts are generally pretty high fat, and then the calories just they can sneak up on you pretty good, and the carbs can still sneak in there as well. And so I found that nuts are kind of a bridge into those diets, but they're also like the downfall of people. And so it seems like having an alternative to for low carbers that have the crunch seems like a good thing to have. I'm not sure if there's anything with regards to nuts or anything, but I in general I just think that nuts are better off for a diet or left off if you can't control yourself and have a literal 28-gram serving or whatever.
Yeah, it's almost there's a philosophy around the glycemic index called glycemic load, and that basically is that if you're eating something that it can have a high glycemic index, but you need to eat a lot of volume before it has a material impact on what happens with your blood sugar. Nuts are one of those things that some of them are extremely low in carbohydrates. Macadamia nuts, for example, are one of my favorites, and they're very low in carbs, a little bit of fiber. I can have a handful of those, and they're very satiating. You start getting into some other nuts, like a pistachio, for example, you have to be careful. Nutritionally, they're good, but it's real easy. If you eat a handful of them, you can start getting into that glycemic load very quickly and start loading up on the carbohydrates. So I agree with you that the nuts are a good nutritional profile, but you have to be a little careful about how you go at them on your nutritional lifestyle. I think one of the things that an interesting fact when you think about that kind of chewing and versus textural experience. So protein cereal has become a really strong and high growth segment. And what we found is that almost 70% of usage of protein cereal is actually coming in a snack format as opposed to somebody sitting down and having just a bowl of cereal, which would be traditionally like cereal and milk. It's actually more on the snacking side. And so what people are finding is not only is the shape very friendly for you to kind of do a pop, kind of pop in your mouth kind of thing like a puff, but they also like to mix it into things like yogurt, for example. So when you're thinking about somebody trying to get, let's say they're in an active lifestyle and they're looking to get 20 to 30 grams of protein, you could go buy an RTD drink. You could go buy a protein bar. Those are all very good solutions. You can also get a serving of protein cereal and mix it with a cup of Greek yogurt, and you've got 20 or 25 grams of protein right there. So it's another way that people are thinking of stacking their protein consumption and using this protein snacking as a way to do that.
Okay, that just gave me a business idea I'm going to give away because I'll probably never do it. Is those the yogurts that have the crunching stuff in the lids? Just replace that with protein puffs, and then boom, it falls in. Because I'm assuming if you put your protein puffs into yogurt, it is going to eventually dissolve or kind of not be good. But if you do one of those lid things, I should look up what brand that was that started that.
Yeah,
is that
so
something that we should do?
Yoplait and some other yogurts did something where they did like granola or they did oats, and they had a little clear pop canister on top of the yogurt cup. So you pulled that off, you opened it up, dumped it in, and then went. But you're exactly right. You could absolutely do that with protein flakes, protein puffs, protein crisps, and loops and things, and offer a similar type of protein benefit. So it's a great idea.
Couldn't we also leverage extrusion, like protein extrusions, in like a trail mix? I'm going down the same idea of like the granolas and oats and stuff, where that kind of texture you could probably mix in some extruded products to that are similar in crunch or flavor, but would add extra couple grams of protein and maybe offset the percentage of macronutrients.
For sure, I think that it is something we're seeing. I think if you've seen Catalina Crunch has a snack mix out there, right? It's a variety of soft textures, hard textures, nuts, different ingredients that are really, it's a pretty good product, in my opinion, but it does bring a lot of protein to the table. They've focused on some of those protein ingredients, and it really is a great eating experience, that we're seeing. And I think format, cereal traditionally bag in a box format is kind of historically what it's been, right? But you're seeing a shift in some of the protein granolas or protein cereals into a stand-up zipper pouch. So throw it in the cup holder on the go, you're seeing it almost like pushing you into more of an eating occasion that's not just breakfast at home, right? It's weird to carry a box of cereal around, but stand up zipper pouch, throw it in your gym bag, you're
Yeah.
throwing it in the car. It's kind of an easy transition as well. So I think they're helping push us that direction just by the packaging formats that we're seeing out there.
I find this in like airports. Like I love finding snacks in airports because I spend a fair amount of time in them, and Mike jokes that when we travel, my food bill is the most expensive part of the the expenses for the trip. But when you're buying food on the go and you're not trying to sit in a restaurant, typically if you're trying to go higher protein, your options are like jerky, protein drinks, maybe yogurts. But I always look at trail mixes, or I think there's a whole bunch of different vocabulary for trail mixes, whether it's got raisins or yogurts or whatever. But they're really never ever leveraging protein in those. But like you said, a zipper bag, it seems really convenient for a lot of people. It seems like you could fit a lot of protein in there. And there seems to be other. I think what we're kind of starting to mix into the conversation is not just extruded snacks, but there's other types of snacks that you guys might be involved in or are parallel to you guys, where you can mix in the proteins that you guys produce that are used for extrusions or other manufacturing. Like I think that might be something important to talk about, is that you guys produce bulk proteins that are more durable for heat and stuff, right? That's what my understanding is, that you don't just make the extruded snacks, but you also make the raw proteins that people then can go utilize to make snacks, right?
Yeah, and essentially those have been optimized for extrusion processing, right? So not all proteins are created equal, and so we have ingredient solutions that you can put in an extruder, and you don't have to figure out what do I need. It's a plug and play type of ingredient that we sell just as that ingredient, or we use that internally for producing snacks and cereals.
Okay,
I
so
think,
getting back to what Ben was just saying, like, okay, take a granola bag, for instance. There's a lot of opportunity if you really just take a step back and look at where the market is kind of failing us in terms of protein. Sometimes they have those yogurt balls that could possibly be replaced with some sort of protein snack, but maybe even finding a way. I'm not sure if this is possible. I guess I'm asking. Let's say I have a granola bag and I want to replace some of the nuts with a high protein, maybe peanut butter nut tasting extruded protein ball snack. Like, can those be put into some of those granola snacks so that you could have, like, we're just trying to hack ways to boost protein without making the product fall apart. Like, and the reason I thought of this was sometimes, people had tried to put little pieces of meat in there and pemmican, and it just doesn't work out. Like, people just don't buy it and everything. So a few people might like it, but I'm trying to think of better ways of fortifying these airport snacks. So are those like some ideas that you could do?
yeah, really the versatility of extrusion is that we can adjust texture. So if you think of a puffy Cheeto, right? That's really soft, really airy, or something like Hippies, if you've seen that. It's a much glassier, almost Captain Crunch type texture. It's got a real hard bite to it. And so people love different textures in snack mixes, right? It's that blend of textures, or even Pirate's Booty, if you've seen that. It's a weird, like, dual texture in the same bite. And so extrusion really gives you a really wide window to hit different textures. So if you said, yeah, I want it to kind of function or be perceived by the palate as a piece of a nut, but yet it's bringing high protein, we can definitely modify the process in order to hit those characteristics that you're really looking to achieve in a snack mix.
So you could emulate a nut through extrusion. That is,
He's nodding his head yes, but he's not saying it. So,
well, Pirate's Booty is
to
a
be
great
determined.
example. I like right, like I don't know when we were asking before, you said like cheese puffs. That's an obvious one. I love when you talk about like metal extrusion. That was a whole nother black hole I got into when figuring this stuff out. But Pirate's Booty is like such a relatable, like it shows that you can play with the settings of extrusion to find airiness or more solid, but like to emulate nuts is such that's nutty. Pardon the pun. It's such a cool idea. I don't know. Then we get back to like the impossible thing again, where it's like, well, I don't know if you emulate something hard enough, if people will reject it. People love their nuts as well. I'm fascinated by this stuff, and I think that the opportunities over the next like 5 to 10 years are really endless.
I think you bring up, Ben, a really good point. This is we're evolving into the need for better nutrition, but better nutrition doesn't mean finding the fake version of something. And I think that's what we're trying to be careful of is when we're talking about these extrusions. Extrusions are not something you're going into nature and finding them. Obviously, we're taking these ingredients and making them into a shape that's friendly, that's fun, that obviously has nutritional value and has some taste and textural experience. The more that we try and duplicate a macadamia nut, think about a puff going to a macadamia nut or a peanut or something, that's going to start to kind of raise that bar to say, really, is that really what I want to be doing, to have having fake nuts or fake seeds or whatever it is as part of my diet? But I love the idea, and I think that's where the next gen is. It's basically taking like a heritage Czech mix that had a couple of different things thrown into it, and now making a higher protein, more nutritionally dense version of that through some of these different flakes, puffs, loops, different type of shapes that you still get the functionality. Again, whether it's plant-based or dairy-based, either way is fine, or even combining the two.
Yeah, I love the Chex Mix call out because a lot of the pieces in like a Chex Mix, you're not replacing a natural nut. A lot of those pieces were already extruded, and you're just making better versions of them, which people are going to accept a lot more willingly. A lot of the times when we talk, and this is all really happening within the last year, I do want to mention, but like a lot of times when we talk about these foods, it's a lot about what can we sneak in without people noticing. And I find that that's a lot more successful or a lot better received than saying, hey, this is your new high protein nut. Because like if we try to tell people we're completely reinventing this thing that is naturally occurring and you already have it, people kind of reject it because it's like, is this GMO? Is it fake? And then if you really start looking at pictures and videos of extruders, it really like the word processed, ultra, like people start saying that. And I'm not afraid of science. I'm not afraid of evolutions in technology for food. I think that it's a really beautiful, cool thing that we as humans can leverage. But a lot of consumers don't want to feel like they're being sold something that is fake or, we're using the word emulating. I really understand how consumers are starting to accept and enjoy some things and kind of maybe reject others. And I think when Mike uses the word Trojan horse, or more of a verb with it, like when we can kind of give people a very relatable food that they already know and enjoy, but add in 5, 10, 15 grams of protein, people are much more willing to accept it and enjoy it because they don't feel like they're being given, that impossible burger patty, which is like, this is not what you were claiming it is. So how I guess one of my questions on this is like when we talked about the different textures and offerings that you guys have, you mentioned like loops and flakes and things that, we're not using the word that we want to use because it's probably a patented or trademarked word out there, but like it's people are very people are willing to relate to these things because they've consumed them in their like, more sugary nature many times in their childhood. How many times are you really creating something new versus like how many times are you emulating something that's already in the food system, I guess is my question.
I would say we do quite a bit of both. And really there is kind of that blue sky stuff that we get into. A customer has an idea, this is where they want to take it. A lot of the products though are, how do I fortify this to make this a better for you option? We see it a lot in snack mixes or granolas, for instance, where they're not changing the entire profile of the granola. They may say we're going to bump the protein, but we really don't want to change. There's 6 ingredients. We only really want to change 2 of those to bring the protein in. So the other components may stay the same. They may still be the macadamia nut, right? They may keep that as a regular, just macadamia nut, recognizable, known, but then really push the protein limit on some other ingredient in that granola to bring the protein up. So it's kind of that balance of indulgence and also nutrition, where you can have the indulgent pieces in there. And, we've seen it with like where you have a Parm crisp or something, and people are like, they're really expensive. They give it this really unique texture. How do we mimic that and make it a little bit healthy? Or how do we keep that in there, but also bring the protein up through another component in that snack mix? So I think there's a lot of approaches, and you're seeing it with even the big players in the industry, in the snack business, are looking at protein. They're not looking to really push it, into that sports nutrition spot, but they're saying that's a trend that we got to get on. And so they're looking at maybe 30% protein fortification. They're not going to 70 or 80, but they know that trend's coming. So we're seeing it across the boards, huge companies or small players, the agile emerging brands that can move quick.
I think the category analog that I would use is protein bars. So if you think about protein bars, we went through a period of time where protein bars were very similar. They were basically a brick. They had very little texture. They had very little flavor. You kind of tolerated the fact that they were nutritionally okay, but they really didn't achieve the taste profile. And then what happened is we got better at those. They've now become an avenue for permissible indulgence, which means I can go eat a 15 or 20 or even a higher 22-gram protein bar and have something that tastes great, that really has an excellent, whether it's a soft texture, whether it's a layered texture, there's different types that people are looking for. And I think what's going to happen now is we're on the kind of the hockey stick growth of healthy snacking, as we're talking about around extruded snacks. It's not going to take us 10 years to figure out how to make them more indulgent, but keep that textural and flavor. I think the learning curve is now going to be a lot faster, and yet consumers are still going to be looking for that permissible indulgence. The interesting thing, though, is that they're not necessarily looking for super high protein. So one of the things we do is we track the levels of protein in the marketplace, and we look at example of protein bars at low protein, medium, and high protein bars. And we're looking at the growth in the category is being driven by high protein bars, which in this case is 15 grams of protein per bar or more. That area is growing at 20+%. The other smaller or lower protein bars are in the 5% range. So we're seeing where the growth is coming from. In the healthy snacking here that we're talking about, like puffs and loops and snacks and granolas and things, we're not into an arms race yet on protein. It's not like people are chasing 25, 30, 40 grams of protein per. I'm not just saying that it won't, but I think the what's interesting is that consumers are not telling us that they want 25 or 30 grams of protein, for example, in a bag, let's say, of puffs or chips. That there's a taste and textural and experience and day part usage. They might be relaxing in the evening. They might be getting ready to play a bunch of video games. They may be kind of traveling, and they to your point, Ben, where you're kind of at an airport and you want something that's good to go, but you're not looking to kind of load the pipe, so to speak, with a ton of protein. So I think we're going to do a better job of learning how to build better textures, but also understand what is that need of protein and how much is useful for somebody's lifestyle.
All right, I have a total curveball question for the conversation, but I think that you guys are the perfect people to answer this question. So we're reaching a fever point with proteinification. Starbucks has protein drinks. Burger King has protein smoothies. Uncrustables just launched a high protein snack. We're seeing protein being added into so many different places. Glanbia is one of the biggest producers of whey protein, and we already, I don't want to speak for you guys, but I've heard from your sales reps that you're sold out until 2026 on whey protein. I love all this protein extrusion, all these snacks, all these protein applications, but is there going to be a constraint on the supply of protein? And is that going to push people towards plant protein or alternative protein sources? Like, what are your guys' predictions on the protein fortification market?
Yeah, I'll start, and Jonathan then jump in here. So I think, first of all, the tightest area of protein today is specifically whey protein isolate. So if we're talking about, which area is whey protein isolate in particular is where, because remember, whey protein isolate comes out of the cheese manufacturing process. And so as you get to that point, there's only so much capacity to be able to take all of that, the cheese processing that comes off of the whey that's basically taken away from the cheese process and converted into WPI or whey protein isolate. So that I think is going to continue to be constrained. So I think we're going to continue to be in some capacity issues here I would say for at least the next year, maybe a year to a year and a half. There are other protein areas like milk protein, for example, some of the plant proteins we were talking about, and then even some of the whey protein concentrate that we have some more flexibility. And when I say we, I mean an industry. So kind of an industry in general, there's more capacity and capability. But I do think in general that if you believe, which we do, that protein consumption is going to continue to increase, that more and more consumers are going to continue to look for more protein in their lifestyle. And we know that approximately 57, almost 60% of consumers are looking to get more protein in their diet today. So the issue is that they're looking to get that amount of protein across a range of different forms and formats. So it's not only a powder or a drink, it's natural protein solutions. We talked about seeds and nuts. It could be a range of snacks. So it's a kind of a buffet of different options. But I do think we're going to see some constraints, especially in WPI, into some of the other protein solutions, given the acceleration that we're seeing in demand. And if GLP-1 starts to get into that growth mode that we think will happen as the three major barriers are solved with them, which is cost, the side effects, and then the application, so the injections, if those are addressed and you see more and more people getting on the GLP-1, that's going to also put further pressure, because they're the number one macronutrient they need is protein. So that, we're in a very tight, kind of marketplace with demand of protein accelerating, and yet we still are chasing the supply a bit in some areas.
Yeah, I think the good news on that, at least, is that, well, at least a lot of the functional foods I've seen, whey protein isolate themselves, it's almost like too dry of an ingredient. So hopefully we can, in the food space, you can get around it a little bit. Getting back to the extrusion process, is there anything that you just cannot do, or a common thing that potential customers or brands ask for, and you just have to say, no, that's just not going to happen?
There's not a lot that we struggle to do, I would say, in terms of what customers are asking us to do. The market capacity in twin screw extrusion is relatively tight. So with historical snacks, they're run on single screws. And so as this transition to protein fortification happens, makes it significantly more challenging for those folks with single screw extrusion technology to do higher protein levels. And so that opens up a bit of capacity on the single screws. But in terms of the market or what we can or can't do, I mean, they always push us for more protein, right? How can we get more, how can we get some unique textures, or, those things are where we get pushed probably the most. But there's really, the limitations from an ingredient standpoint is 90% protein right now is really the max. So how can we use the highest protein levels to hit those high proteins? If you start introducing starch and some of those other ingredients, pretty easy. It becomes much easier at lower levels of protein. So the complexity goes down. But generally, there's not a lot that we would say no right off the bat to. Not that we're always successful, but that's research and development, I guess. And consumers are always looking for the next thing, which is great for our business also.
Okay, as a follow-up to that, at Expo West 2025, one company I saw was called That's It, and it was basically just mashed apple and a different fruit. So it was just a fruit snack, no processed, very just minimally processed, no added other ingredients. If I wanted to take a fruit type snack like that and protein fortify it, would you be able to help with such a process, knowing that fruit can possibly go rancid? So I'm not really sure what they're doing with all that. Like, how would you approach a problem like this? Which, by the way, after I saw that at Expo West, about 4 months later, I saw That's It at Costco, and I was very happy for them because they seemed very nice at the booth. So, shout out to them. But either way, how would we try to protein fortify it, just like a fruit roll-up type snack?
Yeah, it's definitely not, it wouldn't be in my group. So we have different groups that handle different categories. So that would probably be in our bar group, where they would look at that. They understand the protein chemistry, right? Is what's going to be stable over the course of shelf life. Is it going to be something that hardens that texture? It's probably a nice, soft, pliable texture. How do we achieve the same texture by getting protein in there? So there's certainly solutions that we have to do that control moisture migration, and be able to hit a product that is like that, but also to bring them along on that journey with protein fortification for sure. So
I'm not sure if you can answer this because it's a different group. If let's say I did want to do that, does this come with like an hourly consulting type rate, or is this kind of part of the package of using your ingredients? Because it seems like a lot of this is exploratory and consultative, or however that word is.
Yeah, we kind of do both. So it depends on what it is. If there's an ingredient play for us, that's one thing. We also do kind of contract product development on the extrusion side. But yeah, it's included in that. So the commitment is you come out, work with us. We help design that product, and then that's covered. Obviously, the opportunity is what we look at, is what's the opportunity moving forward with ingredients, as well as processing. So generally in those scenarios, a lot of times it is done for free. Those ideation samples are created, and we really want you on site because it's the most cost effective way to do it. Historically it was, let's make a sample, we'll send it to you, you tell us what's wrong with it, and if it's like, we could have made that change in 2 minutes if you were on site giving us that instant feedback loop. And so we've really moved to that, to say we want to collaborate in person with you at our site with all the resources that we have, whether it's in our Twin Falls, Idaho site, or our Illinois site. Those sites can react quickly to kind of what your targets are versus this back and forth that takes a long time to ideate and move forward.
Awesome. Yeah. Get on a flight, folks. Sometimes, maybe we should do some sort of collaboration and document a lot of this next year for a certain show. Okay. So one thing we talked about way earlier on, that we've focused so much on protein here, but you also mentioned adding fiber. So how does the story change with fiber? Are you talking about specific fiber ingredients, or any fiber ingredient, or, certain fiber ingredients like maybe psyllium husk you just simply don't want to touch, or anything like that? Can you give us the rundown on what the market's looking for in fiber, and then how your process may change, or have to adapt to deal with those fibers?
You can start, and then James maybe can talk to the market specifically of what folks are looking for. But we can work with a lot of fibers, just keeping in mind that they have a different impact, depending whether they're soluble or insoluble on the process of extrusion. So they can impact your cell structure or that eating experience. They may give you the more glassy texture, kind of gritty chew down versus a real soft, puffy texture. Most of them tend to reduce expansion, and so that's where you have to be a bit careful on having the right ingredient in there. One thing that's really helpful is some of those bring in a sweetness to them. So ingredients like inulin tend to bring an inherent sweetness to the party. As we know, sugar is not in favor right now. And so as you look at that, where you're trying to replace sugar with things, anything that can lend to the sweetness of that ingredient, or the base puff, or the topical application, really helps us. So we may use those on a topical, or we may use those in the base extruded piece.
Yeah, the only build I would have there is, as we're looking at what consumers are looking for in fiber, they're really looking for, number one, they're looking for gastrointestinal support, which fiber is obviously a part of that, but it's only one aspect of it. So we're seeing an interest in fiber. And those, when you think about some of the ingredients like inulin or tapioca starch or chicory root, or some of these things that are used fairly commonly, what I could see consumers really indicating is, I would like to have a little bit more fiber, but I don't want it to be at the cost of GI distress. And so that's where we have to be really careful. And chicory root is a great example that, that people can have some really nasty distress that comes along with that. So you have to be careful on which one you use. But they're looking for more of a holistic GI health, and that comes for other ingredients as well. Certainly fermented foods are very popular. When you think about kefir, think about cottage cheese, are great examples. When you think about colostrum, for example, is a small but growing segment because of the gut health and gut permeability help that it can offer. So I think for us, it's more about thinking about gastrointestinal support with a couple different options around that. Certainly fiber would be one of them, but there's other areas I think that as well that we think are great to offer.
This is completely like a tangent off of that, but just out of curiosity, because you mentioned colostrum and you guys work with a lot of milk products. Do you guys do anything with colostrum, or is that just a trend you're tracking?
Yeah, it's a great question. We do, actually. We made a couple acquisitions a few years ago in the colostrum area. And so we bought two companies that are some of the most well-renowned companies in the global colostrum area. Colostrum it's a wonderful product in the sense that It offers a combination of benefits, whether it's immune health, whether it's gut health, and even if you're getting some of the super high, kind of the most recent colostrum that comes out from the calf or from the mom before, after it's, so the calf gets what they need, and then the leftover comes from the mom that we're able to capture. That colostrum is actually able to help you with gut healing. So if you think about a condition called leaky gut, it's where your gut permeability is compromised, and it allows bacteria to move back and forth in the body, and that can cause you immune health issues. You want that gut to be not permeable. You want it to be really tight and closed. And so colostrum, actually in its really strongest form, can help you with that. So we're seeing more and more interest in colostrum. It's still small. It's still kind of an up and coming segment, but it ties right into that gastrointestinal health focus that people have. If COVID did anything, it basically locked the linkage between immune health and gut health. Like, those are now inextricably linked. Consumers are very comfortable with those two things working together. Now the question is, so what do I do about it? What are the products we can use? And we see a lot of positive trends. And like I said, things like the fermented products, fermented dairy, for example, and colostrum are examples. And then we're seeing fiber in other areas, as Jonathan was describing.
I like that. I think I don't know how long you guys have been interested in sports nutrition, but I've been clocking this kind of trend where, similar to what we were talking about before, when people kind of reject when we're trying to too closely emulate something that is natural and great. Like, colostrum was sold maybe 10 years ago for like growth factors and IGF and growth hormone. Like, people were like too much trying to make it sound like a growth hormone drug. And now we're really seeing like some very natural, holistic, or like reasonable goals with it. And I feel like a lot of ingredients are starting to come around where we're not trying to oversell them. We're just trying to market them as like reasonable applications for our system. So that's exciting to hear that you guys, I mean, two companies in colostrum. That sounds really cool.
Colostrum's one of those funny products, Ben, where we talk about, sometimes the description is the product is loaded with immunoglobulins. Well, I got to tell you, if you don't know what those are, it doesn't sound like something that you want to consume. But if you think about it in terms of antioxidants, if you think about it as the ability to kind of help your body be stronger from an immune health standpoint, well, that's just about what everybody wants. And so sometimes it's even the language and to your point, the positioning. It's not meant to be a replacement for performance enhancing drugs because it offers, IGH, for example. But what it can do is really offer some tangible benefits on the GI health side, and those translate into other areas like immune health.
Yeah, this has been a concept that Mike and I have talked a lot about, whether we're talking about like herbal extracts or like, very specific isolated constituents and stuff. And now we're talking about dairy. Like, when we create whey protein isolate, like, we all love protein, and what we're referring to as protein is mostly like beta lactoglobulin, like a very specific part of it. But most people don't realize that like whey is really like a soup of different proteins, and many times because of all that processing, we might be missing out on other things that were originally in that milk. And it's kind of cool to see us kind of like zooming out and seeing the other benefits in there. So it's kind of cool to see Glanbia, because I think of you guys for like whey protein concentrate and whey protein isolate most often, because I know you guys move metric tons of that literally. But as we zoom out and look at other parts of it, it's really reassuring to see you guys like investing in colostrum and other parts of that, because I'm excited to see brands starting to marry those pieces back together, kind of unironically, since we're paying you guys so much to isolate them, and then we're blending them again and spending more money on that. But it's exciting to see people understanding and valuing the other parts, like you mentioned, James. Mike, if you want to pull us back to the actual conversation.
Well, I mean, yeah, so we talked about protein, then we talked about fiber. I got to ask about the trends that you're seeing in terms of the oils, because obviously seed oils have been downtrodden more than ever lately. And so I'm kind of curious what oils are working, what fats work with these extruded proteins, which ones don't, if there's any opportunities there for other things that we're not talking about or anything, or what kind of trends you're seeing and what kind of technologies you have available on that.
Jonathan, you want to maybe talk about some of the oils that you use, and then I can talk a little bit about where some of the trends are going in terms of direction.
So yeah, I would say we could use pretty much any oils. That's not really an issue for us, either a plastic fat or a liquid oil. But again, seed oils, we're seeing a little trend away from it. Oil stability is a big thing that we see. These snacks need to have a shelf life, and so I would say we still see a good amount of usage of high oleic sunflower. Avocado is certainly trending. There's a degree of MCT. It depends on the market they're playing in too. So some of those oils are pretty expensive, and so you see people kind of managing a little bit of their COGS because of those oil costs. Coconut's one that we see from time to time. It's very, very indulgent, a very unique mouthfeel, but it works really good on some products. And so we do see kind of a mix of oils. I would say nothing adopted that's really trendy other than avocado is probably the one that we're seeing more of recently.
James, with your background in keto, do you think that there is a value proposition on like the different types of coconut oils or avocado oils, or do you think that at this point people are just kind of getting away from seed oils and it's just kind of like a name recognition?
I think there is value in some of the more, kind of, I'll call them more healthy oils, the non-seed oils. So those would be like coconut oil, avocado oil. Olive oil still certainly fits within that, but I know there's some flavor and kind of heat elements that you have to be a little bit careful of in that. But I think there definitely is value in it, and it really comes down to whether someone is looking to create a product that really has more of that true clean label approach. Because if you're talking about a clean label product, you're targeting a consumer that cares about clean label, and that consumer is going to know the differences between these oils, and so they're going to place an emphasis on the quality of that oil that's included in the product. You have other products today. Jonathan mentioned high oleic sunflower oil. We don't see consumers really understanding what high oleic means. Like, it can be on the package, but consumers are going to look at that. Generally speaking, they don't know what it means. And so I think if that's going to be something used more often, there needs to be some element around from the manufacturer or the brand to talk about why are they using it, what's the advantage of it versus kind of a standard sunflower oil. So we do see there is definitely a higher level of attention to the oils that are being used and moving away from some of the more demonized, more bad, kind of quote unquote bad oils that have really been brought to life on the high omega-6 seed oils.
Yeah, there's an interesting study early this year about claims on package versus how consumers actually respond to them and whether or not they're actually able to understand them the way that regulatory teams are trying to actually convey them. And I think that you mentioned like the word clean, whether it's clean formula, clean packaging. And I'm reminded of years ago, I went to bodybuilding.com to do a training with their customer service associates on a mass gainer that I had been with a brand on. And we used the word clean calories, and their regulatory team was like sneaking in with the customer service reps, and they raised their hand. They're like, what does clean mean? And I didn't realize this was a hypothetical question at the time, but I am fascinated with like this. It's obviously like, marketing spin, because we all want to say like, oh, well, it's not, in this case, it's not seed oils, right? Or for carbohydrates, it's not maltodextrin, or, like it. Do you have like a definition when you say clean packaging or clean ingredients, what that means to you? Because it seems to me like consumers are emotionally responding to a few different things. And I think it's great that we're getting to the point where consumers are starting to respond. But it also seems like sometimes we can't really effectively communicate to them about a lot of this stuff. Yeah,
I think one thing that we tend to see is that consumers look for recognizable ingredients. I think that's at the base of it, is what people consider clean, right? Is it a recognizable name? That's what we hear a lot of, I think, in the R&D side, is I don't know if consumers will recognize that ingredient, and that's really become a key thing that we look at, and whether it's, in some cases, you look at the piece of, is it a name that is there a common name, right, that's acceptable to put in that place of that versus the technical name. And so that's a bit different than Europe. Obviously, they have very, very, there's no question about what the name of that ingredient is going to be or what the E code is going to be to that ingredient. So I do think that's where consumers are kind of looking, is if I know what's in there, that's helpful. If I have to look at it and be like methylcrystalline cellulose, right? What is that? They get a little bit nervous. And I think that's, as we talked earlier, plant-based meats, that was really a challenge for them, is because some of those ingredients just don't look good on the label. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, I mean, we follow kind of there's not a real clear definition, I guess, in terms of what clean label is. And I think that's something that's going to be batted around a bit from the current administration. But when you talk about no, limited or no preservatives, no additives, no flavors, and those sorts of things, you can get into ingredients where consumers are still confused. They're not sure exactly what something is or isn't, and what role it plays in the ingredient. So I think when we look at the clean label, we try and approach it through two ways. One is the familiarity, to Jonathan's point, around do people actually know what it is? And then secondarily, how do you keep the list of ingredients really small, really tight, really kind of simple, so that in a matter of, let's say 4 to 7, and I'm spitballing here, but directionally, people could know, okay, I see what's in it, and I generally have a sense around what it is, and I'm not concerned that it's some weird ingredient that I've never heard of before. Even in some of our we supply into the oven baked, kind of the baking area. We can bring flax as one of our ingredients that can go into that area. We talk about the ability to offer clean label by offering our flax capabilities that can pull out other ingredients, other fillers and emulsifiers that are in a product today that you no longer need when you put this product in. And so that's a wonderful way to offer the opportunity for a customer to move from a non-clean label, which again, is it familiar? Is it a long list? To now something that is familiar in a short list of ingredients that actually positions the product in a more healthful fashion.
Yeah, I like that description a lot, because clean is very open to interpretation, but transparency is not very open to interpretation, like whether or not you really understand what's in there. And also just simplicity in formulation, I think, is something that lands with a lot of people. Do they really understand where things are coming from? We can have a fun conversation about whether all natural products are really even good products, or whether synthetic products are really bad products. But when people can read a formula and really relate to where things are coming from, I love that mention of flax. You can use something which is considered more natural, but really kind of just knocks out 3 or 4 other ingredients so that people can better read and understand an ingredients label. Because I think the 4 of us on this call, we might be able to read an ingredient section and really understand what a lot of those things are, and not worry too much about those long words that seemingly don't have any vowels, like Jonathan kind of mentioned. Like I always kind of have like a parent test with this. If I gave this to my parents and they read the ingredient section, could they really understand what's going on here? And I love that mention of flax, because I definitely understand what you're saying there. Mike, I'm sorry, in your absence, we've gotten off topic again, but again, kind of just talking about how Glanbia gets into clean formulations and what that really means with clean formulations.
Gotcha. Does this microphone work right here?
Yeah,
I had
absolutely.
a full-blown power outage, so we had I had backup batteries, but yeah, we're out for multiple hours apparently. So yeah, I hopefully I'm going to go back and listen to that, because the whole seed oil thing is obviously, there's going to be a lot of changes, I think, as the awareness happens. But then at the other end of the spectrum, there's a lot of people who simply still don't care. So really, brands have to find their demographics and lean into what makes sense in general. And we could even argue what a seed oil is, or what we're really chasing, like the omega-6 that you mentioned and everything. So I'll excited to go back and listen to that. And thanks for picking up where I left off. That was the end of my list of questions for me personally, though. So I don't personally have a whole lot of other things. I've personally learned a ton here. I'm not sure if you guys have talked about, if there's anything else that you want to mention. I can listen to James give statistics all day long. So James, if you have any that you want to toss out there beforehand, before we're done, I would love to hear your statistics. And then besides that, talking about what's going on at SupplySide Global coming up here end of October, because it is October 2nd of 2025 as we record this.
So one of the things that healthier snacks do, or better for you snacking do, is they give permission to the consumer to actually consume more often. And here's a data point that you might find interesting. So if you think about sweet snacks, okay, so something that has chocolate or vanilla or caramel or cookies and cream, something like that, we know that 10% of consumers consume a standard sweet snack at least 4 times a week, so 10%. When you move to a better for you indulgent snack, we see that 31% of consumers consume a better for you indulgent snack at least 4 times per week. So it goes from 10% on kind of a standard sweet snack to now a better for you indulgent sweet snack is almost 3 times more frequent. So I think that it's indicative of how consumers are thinking about snacking. They like the ease, they like the convenience, the taste profile has to be there, no doubt, but they also want to know that they're eating something that has some functional benefit, that has some type of functionality that helps them on their journey. And I think that's what better for you indulgence really comes into. We were talking about protein bars, the same thing. If I know that I can eat something and a better for you snack, a chip, a puff, a brownie, a cookie, whatever, and I know that I'm getting some functionality, protein, fiber, we talked about a couple options there, then, and I enjoy the taste, now I'm kind of getting the best of all worlds. And that's what we're trying to offer. And I think our capabilities really lend themselves to partnering with customers and collaborating on building out those innovative ideas and how we do that.
Excellent. So on top of that, SupplySide Global, what's going to have a booth? Are you two going to be there yourselves, or do you have a game plan besides the other things happening that we have with you?
Yeah, thank you for asking. And yeah, we will be exhibiting at SupplySide Global coming up here at the end of October. Our theme we'll actually have 2 booths. We'll have one that's Glanbia Nutritionals, and then as Jonathan was describing, we have a flavor platform with flavor producers and Foodarom that will be right down the aisle from us. We'll have 2 large booths there, be able to talk to customers and talk to potential new product development ideas. Our theme for this quarter, we talk about different themes every quarter and focusing on what the consumer needs are and then how we can bring solutions to help. Our theme is weight management and metabolic health. So we're talking a lot about what happens when people are on the weight management process, whether they're using a GLP-1 drug or not. What are they looking for nutritionally? What happens with their lifestyle? And how can we offer nutritional solutions to help people on that? So we'd love to talk to you more about that. And then I think we're incredibly excited to be partnering with you guys and some of our other colleagues in the industry about bringing to life the creatine. And so we're excited to bring some visibility around all of our collective capabilities on functional beverages and the application for cognitive health. And certainly tea has a nice tie into some of the weight management that we were talking about before.
Yeah, super excited to get into that. We just recently started announcing that and getting into it. So for anyone listening, we'll have a lot of content leading into SupplySide and after SupplySide about that whole collaboration. You guys have been extremely helpful, and that's a whole other part of your R&D and product development departments that brought together creatine, and we're kind of breaking it out of the box with you. So I just want to say again, like Mike said earlier, I've learned so much from this conversation. So Jonathan and James, thank you guys so much. This has been really interesting. I think everyone's going to really appreciate the information you shared.
Great. Well, thank you for having us. Really enjoyed talking with you. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks again for the invite and opportunity, and see you at SupplySide.
All right. Thank you, guys.
See you then. Thank you.